Coming up, what an excellent day for deep discussions. Well, howdy folks, and welcome to Minute 26 of the Exorcist Minute, a show where we endeavor to examine, extrapolate, and excavate the Exorcist minute by terrifying minute. My name is Lester Clark.
And I'm Keenan Diaz.
And we'll be your holy guides on this journey through what some have called the scariest movie of all time. So our minute begins with Chris asking where'd Reagan get that idea?
And ends with Damien carrying 2 beers through a crowded pub.
But before we join our gloomy priest for a pint, let's hold up, let's back up, rewind, and where did Reagan get that idea? That idea being the idea that Chris, her mom, is going to marry Burke Dennings. And now I see why Friedkin decided to have Reagan reading a tabloid in that previous minute, because that is definitely one possible source from which this distressing bit of information could come. Reagan persists, but you like him. And Chris answers with what I think is the best answer. Of course I like him. I like pizzas too, but I'm not going to marry one. But that doesn't get Reagan to laugh. And we were talking about in previous minutes, right? Chris knows Reagan's humor and like Dumbbird and Stinkpot and, whatever, Bareface. I mean, it's not my humor, but whatever.
My humor,
yeah. But like we get this idea that Chris knows, how to get Reagan to laugh, but this doesn't work. I like pizzas, but I'm not going to marry one.
I thought that was a very good joke. I thought that was excellent.
I would give that a 10 out of 10, yes. Right? We're just in the room, like in the back. We hold up the cards. We're like 10, 9.5, right? It was a good joke, Chris. That was very good. But no, not for Reagan. She's on a singular track. And now comes the real question. You don't like him like Daddy? So here it is. Here's the thing that's bothering Reagan.
Well, where else would you think that she would get it from there's limited options from Sharon or her father.
Well, I have a whole thing on that.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
But that got me wondering, where were we in the zeitgeist about divorce in the early 70s? Like, I vaguely remember growing up in the 80s that it was like permeating throughout children's television programs, children's media, attempting to inform kids about the concept in this healthy way. But even in those programs, it seemed like a relatively new thing. Like, this is a thing that happens now and it's normal and it's not your fault. Like, that was always the thing, right? Like, it's not your fault, because that's where a child's mind would naturally go.
Right.
Like, why don't, my mom and dad want to live together anymore? Is it like, does it have something to do with me? And so now you get these programs attempting to explain this new concept in a healthy way, new to, children. But I'm curious, when did it become socially acceptable to talk about or depict in movies? And then also, when did it start getting depicted in movies? Like, what was the attitude? Are people watching this in the 70s being like, oh, she's divorced, no wonder the devil shows up?
That was kind of the common thing in movies up until, I would say, there's not like a definite time where that is lifted, but I suppose like the early 60s, it would be incredibly difficult to find positive portrayals of divorce. There's even in the 1950s a series of melodramas, like one with Jane Wyman and Rock Hudson, where she's a little bit older. That's called All That Heaven Allows, this Douglas Sirk movie. And she's a widow, and she meets a younger man, and everyone's still gossiping about her. Like, how could she do this when her kids still live at home? How could she do this so soon after her husband dies? And how could she do it with a younger man who doesn't have money? It's unfair to him that he has to rely on your money, and it's unfair to your kids that they are supporting your new boyfriend with their father's money. So even the idea of a widow remarrying too early was taboo.
Wow.
And I'm thinking about, so I don't know if I have a good answer of when, because it was pretty gradual. There were rules in place that govern content in films. That's called the Production Code or the Hays Code or the Breen Office. You'll hear all those things. But we're talking about essentially the same ideas, and that would discourage showing adultery in films.
Okay.
So amongst other things like violence and sex and gay people and drug use, adultery was one that was sort of taboo. And it said that if you were going to be an adulterer, you would have to leave your, you wouldn't be able to leave your husband or wife. you'd have to go back to them. You have to uphold marriage. And sometimes it meant that adultering characters died. That was how we resolved that.
Oh, okay.
But if you think about that, one of the things that suggests if movies always have adulterers or people thinking about leaving their wives or leaving their husbands, either staying with their husbands and wives or dying, then that precludes you from stories of, say, a woman who leaves her domestically violent spouse.
Right.
Right. So that's just something you can't have on there. Like, oh, if your husband is so dangerous and bad that you're worried about your safety or your children, that's not something you could see in movies and find a model for.
Or like even have like in this story where like Chris, just as a single mom, is trying her best to hold everything up, right? Like and make this life for her daughter. Like that's not like we see that now is like, oh, she's the good guy. She's trying to make like all of this happen for the sake of her daughter. Wow.
Yeah, so you didn't really have role models if you were in that situation as a single mother. In television, you know the Mary Tyler Moore Show, probably.
Yes.
Yeah, so that came out in 1970, and Mary Tyler Moore had already been on a show called The Dick Van Dyke Show, where she was Laura Petrie, and she was, in many ways, the best of the 1960s, like stay-at-home mom characters. She's very, very funny and very independent, and it's a real partnership with her and her husband, and it's a great portrayal. And then she got her own show in 1970, and they're like, well, now she's older than most characters would be in a sitcom, you know, about a single girl. So how do we explain that? Like, you know, she's like, oh my gosh, she's in her early 30s. How do we explain that she's not married? And so the thought was that, oh, she's a newly divorced woman and she's moving to Minneapolis. And they're like, no, we can't have that because people will sort of assume that she had divorced Dick Van Dyke.
Oh my gosh.
So they make some, you know, that would have been a bold choice, but they make a kind of equally bold choice that she's in her early 30s and she has not been married and she decides not to get married and be a career woman instead.
Interesting.
Because those literally are the options then. Like you either are a career woman or you are married.
Yeah.
And then there was a show a little earlier than that called Julia, which you might not know, which is with Diane Carroll. And she's a single mother. She's a widow. And she's a black woman, Diane Carroll. And so Julia is a nurse, and her husband has died in Vietnam as a lieutenant, I believe. And so she's raising her son all alone. And so a lot of people praise Julia because it is this non-stereotypical look at Black life. She's a nurse. She's educated. Her husband was in the military and died, and they live kind of a middle-class life. And then other people, especially in the Black community, there's still debates about that. Like that's our depiction of Black life on television has so little to do with a lot of Black people's experience in the cities, you know, who can't find education or have I've seen both. I've seen arguments that like what they should have done with Julia is have a father in the picture because we don't have a lot of depictions of Black fathers in media. So it's trying to so there's debate on all sides, which happens when you only have one show about Black people on TV at a time, because then it has to stand in for everybody's Black experience. Right?
And probably like written by white people.
So. Yes. That was written by white people. Right.
And when you said like can't find education, you meant like it was denied.
It was denied them. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So some people say like, oh, it's great. Do we have this positive portrayal? But other people said that like her being a widow as opposed to a divorced mother, that is not really expressing how Julia would be a single mother in reality.
I see. Huh. I like how we've already seen a character light up in front of his aging mother, like light up a cigarette. And in this minute, we're going to see the same character drinking at a bar, but we just had this whole talk about divorce because divorce is like so like on another level. It's like, oh, who's depicting that on screen? That's gosh.
Yeah, there's no MPA rating for divorce, like rated PG-13 for talk of divorce.
Wow.
But that would be more disturbing to me as a child than seeing someone smoking a cigarette.
That was the thing that got me. Like in the last minute, right? He's talking about it's like Mom, I want to move you out of here. It's like this is a dump. This is a horrible place. And then just like poof, like on that, like there's so much smoke. I'm like, Timmy, what are you doing? Put that
of course,
out.
We talked previously about my McDonald's birthday as a child.
Oh, yes.
I must have been 3 or 4, and how big of a deal that was. But you used to smoke at McDonald's. There were ashtrays in McDonald's, even though it was a kid's restaurant.
I vaguely remember. Yeah. Oh my God. They were just part of the culture, right? And now we're back to cigarettes. Oh my God!
Yeah, don't you remember in like Chuck E. Cheese? We grew up in Las Vegas, both of us. So Chuck E. Cheese basically, was a casino. It had that smoke. It was just I saw a tweet that they called it a child rat casino.
Yeah, it is kind of like it's a kid's casino, right? Like,
yeah, and in the 80s, it certainly had smoke everywhere.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my God. Okay. Well, back to divorce. No.
Yay.
Yeah. My God. But like, okay, so now I feel like we would be like, oh man, Chris is trying so hard. Like you said, Keenan, like she's got to play dad and mom to this kid, right? She's working so hard, and this poor kid is just, like in the middle of it, And once again, we have that motif of both mothers and fathers. And there's a really cool YouTuber by the name of Comic Book Girl 19 who has done an entire like live stream book club discussion on our book, on The Exorcist. And she made a comment that stuck with me at this point in the book. She said something like, there are no fathers in this house. Reagan's father and God the Father are gone from this house. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's an interesting way to think about it. And again, we're going to have some fathers coming in a little bit later. But for now, it's just mom. And it's all up to mom to figure out what's going on and how to fix it. And right now, at least, it still doesn't seem like anything out of the ordinary is going on. We're getting the first hints of what could simply be a little girl who is coming to terms with her parental situation. And I say simply when, in fact, this is not a simple thing at all. It's a very heavy and big thing and quite a lot to grapple with, even without demons and exorcisms, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the strengths of this movie, is that it is so incredibly character-based. It is so much on just simple, again, seemingly simple performances of these actors. It's not about all the pyrotechnics that will come later on. I mean, it takes quite a while before we get to the real horror stuff where we see a monster. It's not uncommon, I suppose, for good monster movies to hold off on the reveal of the monster until later. But we don't, as in, a lot of Exorcist ripoffs start with, characters getting ripped to shreds and dying, and then we reset. But here we have a long, long ramp up, and I think it really pays off that we are totally invested in their character drama well before we start adding the complications of demons.
Absolutely, yes. And to speak to that, Keenan, like we were talking in our Halloween episode about like the slasher movies, right? Like Michael Myers and Jason and Freddy and all of those, right? And it's like it's like, bodies are a dime a dozen, right? Like, right. You hack and slash your way through like multiple characters, and it it's almost like a video game type thing, like where it's like, oh, there's that red shirt gone, there's that person gone,
Yeah, and the fun of it is then seeing how creative the kills can be, or in what surprising situations, and you really are laughing along with a good slasher film a lot of the time, because you're like, oh, well, that's creative, that's fun.
Yeah, and I'm not dissing those films. They have their own kind of like function and flavor and everything like that. But in this type of horror film, like we get invested with these characters first, and then when the spooky stuff starts happening, we're like, oh no, like not Reagan, not Chris. But like I said, yeah, forget all that like demon stuff for just a second and try to think how like kids and families had it back, in the 70s, going through something like this without resources, without counseling, or at least counseling as it is today, without the societal support that we now have, which is by no means perfect even now, but which is a world away at this point in time. Right.
And without the depictions of divorce in media and showing little girls that it's okay and that they can get past it.
Yeah, right. In the same way that, the scenes with like Karras and his mom are the hardest in this movie for me to watch. These scenes where the divorce is sort of brought to the forefront make me like way more uncomfortable than any like, head spinning or spider walking. So here, like I said, we see the first little hint of what could be bothering Reagan. And after Chris assures her that there's nothing to worry about, that she and Burke are just friends, Reagan says, well, I heard differently. And Chris says, oh, you did? What did you hear? And yeah, okay, like, hang on, pause. Yeah, what did you hear, Reagan? And from whom? And like this time around, like I said, right, this line really stuck out for me. Like, who are you hearing this stuff from? You know who I think it is, Keenan? Well, okay, what do you think it is?
I would say Sharon.
You would say Sharon? Oh.
I can't. Who else does she have to talk to?
Oh, my God.
It's Sharon or her father. And then we see in the next scene that she hasn't talked to her father.
Keenan, who the hell does she have to talk to? Keenan, you know who I think it is?
No.
I think it's Howdy.
No.
Who is she spending all that time talking to on the Ouija board?
Lester,
and what
that's terrifying.
What are they talking about?
What would they talk? Oh, I had never put that together. Right. Where would she get it from?
And now I understand why we had that scene. Again, like with the sensational tabloid, that's a red herring. That's a distraction from what is really going on. And you know what, Keenan? Hot take, just maybe a little bit early. I don't think this Captain Howdy fellow is a very nice guy.
Oh, but he's got such a nice name.
Right? You know what? I'm going to go so far as to say I don't even think he's a real captain.
That's stolen valor. Nowadays, that gets you beat up at the mall if you go and, oh, I'm Captain Howdy. Could you spare a dime for me?
Could you help an old altar boy fodder?
They're like, those ribbons are for the Marines.
Oh, my God. But yeah, but no, think about it, Keenan. I ask the questions, and he makes the answers.
I don't like this.
That's what she said.
Yeah, you're right.
And I can see it now. She's downstairs. She's downstairs on that Ouija board, talking to Captain Howdy, just trying to get advice from a friend.
Right.
Probably asking stuff like, "Hey, does Mom still love Dad? Does Mom still love me?"
Mm-hmm.
And again, hot take. I don't think Captain Howdy is really her friend. No. Just a hunch. And we'll have to see in later minutes, I guess. But
that's
like,
her only friend.
Yeah, that's her, right?
That had never occurred to me, and that is really sad and really scary.
Yeah.
Of course, they must talk about. She doesn't say like what kind of things she talks to Captain Howdy about.
Right. And you notice she doesn't say like, well, I heard differently. It's like, who did you hear from? And she's like, really like, well, I just heard, right? She doesn't want to say, kind of in that same way that like when Chris finds the Ouija board, she's like, hey, have you been playing with this? Yeah. And she like gets a little distant. Right. And I don't know. It's just making me wonder.
In the screenplay, Reagan says, I just heard ... And so then, this could be this is an early draft of the screenplay. Maybe there was a rewrite, but also maybe with the kind of more improvisational directing style that comes about in the 1970s, especially with child actors, that potentially, you might do this with an actor every once in a while. Like if it's a ... and you might ask the scene partner to not continue on and let that person actually finish that thought. And so you get this really interesting line reading of that. I heard differently. Yeah, really, really cool Linda Blair moment there.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I didn't even think that could be like an addition to an addition made by Linda Blair.
It might be. Yeah, we're not sure where it comes from, but that's not uncommon. I was on set directing a small scene with some student actors, and that was a nice exercise to do sometimes, is to let them, what's the end of that line, and let them feel it out. And then on the next take, and then usually you would cut out the improvisation, but it helps the actor on the next take figure out whatever. But yeah, potentially that's still in there.
It's interesting that you say that, because like in the book too, it's just, well, I heard ...
Right.
So this differently is either Linda Blair's own creation, her own like contribution, or
Friedkin or Blatty adding it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. But yeah, no, that's my guess, is that she heard it from Captain Howdy.
Ugh. Captain Howdy is my favorite character, but that's mean. That's down low. Captain Howdy.
But it goes like, I don't have notes for this, but like I was thinking about it while I was watching. This kind of follows in line with like typical behavior of an abusive relationship too, like a narcissistic type of like, separate you from the rest of your support group, get you away from your family and friends, and be like, hey, I'm the only one. I'm the only one who knows you, who understands you, who can help you, and then just be really shitty to them.
Right. Everyone else is lying to you. They're going to tell you that Burke is just her gay best friend. And I'm telling you, no, Burke is your new father. And so you can't trust anything they say.
And you know what, Rags? Oh, wait, no, I don't call you Rags. Your mom calls you Rags. You know what, Reagan? I think this Burke guy's got to go.
Right. Exactly. Right. I can't do it alone, though. I'm too weak and powerless.
Oh my God, Keenan, we're putting the pieces together.
This is our fan fiction. This is our from the point of view of Captain Howdy.
Of Captain Howdy, right? This is our headcanon. It's okay.
Exactly. This is the Ryan Murphy Nurse Ratched TV show.
Oh, what?
Oh, you don't know about that?
Yes. No, don't. Yeah. Tell me about this. What?
Oh, so it's a prequel from the point of view of Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And that is, she's probably my favorite character in all of literature. Great book, great movie. Louise Fletcher just passed away a couple months ago.
Oh.
And so, yeah, that's how they have to do TV now. They can't, so it's Nurse Ratched. And apparently it's pretty good. I haven't seen it because I was so opposed to watching it. But that's you can't sell a show that's just about a nurse in the 50s who lives in a patriarchal society, and then she takes her place at the hospital and becomes the head nurse through scheming and murders and lying. It has to be a prequel to something else for it to get made. Right. So we could do our own Ryan Murphy Captain Howdy TV show from the point of view of Captain Howdy. Just call it Howdy.
Wow.
Howdy this fall, FX. Sarah Paulson as Captain Howdy.
There's another podcast that I want to turn our listeners on to. It's weird. Like, I'm advertising all of these other podcasts. Like listen to our podcast too, please, though.
Are they advertising us? We don't know.
Well, I don't think they are. I don't think they know we exist. At least this one doesn't. But no, there's this other podcast called The Villain Was Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great.
Yeah, and they examine like movies and TV shows and big IPs from the villain's perspective. And they did one on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and they talked about Nurse Ratched, and it was very interesting. But Keenan, I don't know how sympathetic we can paint Captain Howdy.
Why not?
Well, you know what?
Nurse Ratched, they made her the hero, and she goes
all right, okay.
takes care of business.
Let's workshop this. Like, what is Captain Howdy's, what is his origin? What happened to him?
Oh geez. Well, I think he's been disembodied at some point, and all he wants is a new body, right?
Okay, all right.
So we'd have to, Maleficent him, like the Angelina Jolie one, and we see at the beginning that he has a body, and he's beautiful. He's he's like, if we're keeping it the Ryan Murphy verse, he's Evan Peters, and he's just gorgeous, and he gets disembodied by somebody. You know who it should be, of course, is Reagan McNeil's great grandfather.
Oh, I was going to say Father Marin, but
no. That's you don't get how these terrible ripoffs go. Because that's what really happens, I suppose, in the Exorcist prequels, right?
Right. Yeah.
No. It's Reagan McNeil's great grandfather in like Victorian England, and that way he has to. It's personal. This time it's personal. He has to get the McNeil family
because it's always personal. That's what this is. Yeah. Oh, I love this. Folks, help us make this Captain Howdy prequel. Mm-hmm. Howdy. I'm all on board for this. Howdy is like, I keep on saying like Father Karras is my favorite character. I really like Captain Howdy too.
Me too. I like him. I like saying the name. Mm-hmm. I just like everything about that.
Yeah, no, it's a really cool depiction of like this demonic force that's very like, innocent, but like also kind of, mischievous and trickstery. I really like it.
I have trouble piecing together Captain like putting in my head Captain Howdy being the demon from later. He feels distinct to me. And I know that's not true, right? Like Captain Howdy is whatever demon possesses Reagan, but like this early Captain Howdy that's like playing games and being a trickster. Yeah, I like him the best.
Oh, really? Oh, see, Keenan, this is why we got to get you to that scene, those scenes in the book with Karras and Reagan, like full on possessed Reagan, because he has some convos with Captain Howdy that are just like, yeah, they are so sassy. It's like you're watching Beetlejuice.
Oh, well, in our Angelina Jolie, Maleficent, or Sarah Paulson, Ryan Murphy, Ratched version of Howdy, that demon that possesses Reagan and turns her evil is not Captain Howdy. That is an actual demon that Captain Howdy needs to be behind the scenes helping Father Karras defeat the major demon. So it turns out that our villain is actually a good guy.
Oh, wow, I love that. And that goes with okay. Have you heard this? There's, obviously this is not intended in the movie, but like it's a fun little think piece to play around with. But as soon as people like started learning more about Pazuzu and learning about like his function in, ancient Mesopotamian society as like this protector of children, against Lamashtu and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Like there's this like, film theory. The demon is actually protecting Reagan.
I don't see how. He's eating her flesh.
Yeah.
Right?
Like literally, like I like that. It's a fun little thing to think about, but like, I don't know. And maybe Keenan, if you and I were writing a prequel, like right. we would do that. But like in this movie, I'm like, no. From what? From what are you protecting? Like,
No. Howdy is protecting her from the demon in our version. And
yes. Okay. Yeah. So Chris reassures Reagan that she and Burke are just friends and kisses her goodnight. And that's the end of that scene. And then we get like the last 10 seconds of this minute, we get a little bit of a Ramblin' Man from the jukebox. Father Karras is in a bar and he's buying 2 beers. And now this is a real Georgetown bar known as The Tombs.
Oh, which, okay, great.
Yeah. Is just so appropriate for this film. I love that. The Tombs, right? We got all this preoccupation with death. And of course we got Ramblin' Man from the Allman Brothers Band. But at the risk of rambling on in this minute, I have a podcast. Yeah.
Well, I did. I did want to say, it wasn't too long ago when movies didn't use hits from rock stars in there. Yeah. So that would start to happen in the middle of the 1950s with the Blackboard Jungle. Do you know that one?
Oh, no. Mm.
Well, that one, it's a Sidney Poitier movie, an early Sidney Poitier movie, and Glenn Ford is the star, and it's about a teacher in an inner city school, and all the kids are delinquents. But it starts with Rock Around the Clock and ends with Rock Around the Clock.
Oh, wow.
And that was like the first time they had used, instead of a song from the studio catalog, and instead of like a big band or a jazz song or a musical from musical theater type song, that was the first rock song they'd had. And then they don't do that very often. So in the rest of the 1950s and 60s, there's not a lot of character walks into a bar and then we hear something that would be on the radio for the audience at home. That's not really how it would work. And even in like The Graduate, which has this great rock and roll soundtrack by Simon and Garfunkel,
right?
All those songs by Paul Simon, they were written for The Graduate.
Huh.
Yeah. So those are not like things that you would find on a jukebox somewhere.
Interesting. So are we saying like that this movie, The Exorcist, is like pioneering that, or have they
I think
already
it would be
started?
part of a trend. Yeah, it's part of a trend starting in the late 1960s, the very late 1960s. But that's if you were 5 years earlier than this in 1970. If I can do math, 1968 would be 5 years earlier than this movie. That would be very, very unusual. Interesting.
And would this be, do you think, another case of Carmen coincidence?
Oh, I don't know. The Ramblin' Man.
Yeah, talking about Karras, right? Like he's going one way, he's going the other. He's I don't know.
Well, I guess I've never thought about the lyrics of any Allman Brothers band song. So you're probably onto something.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we're gonna leave it here. We're gonna pick up in the next minute with Karras bringing those drinks to his table. Who's that other drink for? Is he drinking with somebody, or is he just like really stressed? We'll have to wait and see. But I think that is it for this minute. Keenan, is there anything else we missed?
No, I think we got it.
All right. So Keenan, are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I think I am, Lester.
Until next time, folks. The power of Howdy, an origin story compels you. This fall, only on FX.